Well, Mr Speaker, if that's the importance of biosecurity to the national government, it's pretty pathetic, a bit like that minister's speech. If you really do think, Minister, that biosecurity is important, then you'd make a substantive speech on introducing a bill that is quite substantive in its size, but we've yet to see how substantive it might be in its implementation. Mr Speaker, the Labor Party will be supporting this bill to the Select Committee because we believe there are some improvements that can be made in biosecurity, and there is a need to update the Act to bring it into line with new technology. However, if you read the general policy statement in this, Mr Speaker, what it effectively says is that we are going to do, that's the national government, are going to do more with less. And how they do that, Mr Speaker, is if you read carefully, and I'll go through it, it rightfully states, Mr Speaker, and the Minister made no attempt to say this again, that more than any other developed country, New Zealand depends upon the success of our primary industries and the biological systems that support that. Mr King knows that, but Mr Carter doesn't seem to. Mr Speaker, there is more complex biosecurity risk facing this country every single day. We have increased trade, Mr Speaker, and we have increased flows of visitors into New Zealand. Both things that we welcome, but with that increase comes heightened risk, Mr Speaker. So we need to increase and improve the systems that secure our biological systems in this country, Mr Speaker. The statement says here that, of course, there will be clearer roles and responsibilities and improved collaboration and partnerships. A worthy objective indeed, Mr Speaker. How could we ever criticise that? But what it does, it effectively shifts, Mr Speaker, focus back onto industries to take a greater share of the cost and the responsibility. And that's where we will have some questions in the Select Committee, Mr Speaker. The bill and the lead up to the bill says here that the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry will focus its resources at the border on the passengers and baggage and cargo and mail that pose the greatest risk. Well, Mr Speaker, that's code for targeting or in other words, cuts, Mr Speaker. What they are attempting to do is to identify areas of higher risk. It's a great theory where resources will be targeted, but they will cut back in other areas of general risk, Mr Speaker. And the question I have for the government, is it worth the cuts? We go on record quite proudly of saying when we came into, that's the Labor government, Mr Speaker, into power in 1999, there was $94 million being spent on biosecurity. When we left in 2008, there was $187 million being spent on biosecurity. We doubled the amount going into biosecurity because we understood the importance and the growing risk. What did the national government do, Mr Speaker? The first budget, they cut $2 million off the budget, and they cut 54 frontline positions from Biosecurity New Zealand, Mr Speaker. 54 frontline positions, people who look for, assess and astutely identify risk and potential pathways for unwanted pests and diseases and organisms, Mr Speaker. And if you look at what they identify, it is literally tens of tonnes and tonnes every single year, Mr Speaker. There are 54 less people doing that across the country. That is increasing the risk, and we've not seen yet an increased commitment, displayed quite clearly by the Minister's pathetic speech. We've seen no more commitment by the National Act government to biosecurity at a type of heightened risk. Mr Speaker, the bill does do a couple of good things. It shifts responsibility for oversight and management, without actually saying how we're going to do it, of course, in the economic zone, our exclusive economic zone. So we move from 12 miles to 200 miles, and rightfully say that we should be assessing the vessels and the risk posed to New Zealand by economic activity in that area, Mr. Speaker. We do have drilling rigs coming into the country from time to time, less so now that the national government's kind of destroyed economic opportunity, I have to say. But anyway, one in particular was identified as having serious unwanted organisms attached to it, and it was a real dilemma. Mr. Speaker, we've rightfully said that we need a better system of notification, early warning, assessment, and then the ability to deal with those craft coming into this country. We will have a mandate, a legal responsibility to go out to the 200 miles. The next important step forward, Mr. Speaker, in this bill that I acknowledge is recognising ballast water and the potential risk and harm that that poses to this country. It's been there for a long, long time as a risk, Mr. Speaker. There has been an international convention, no law, but a convention and general practice around the transfer of ballast water in craft as they travel from one country to the other. So, for example, if we pick up goods in Singapore, Mr. Speaker, in the harbour at Singapore, and I think we can just start to imagine what might be in the water there as craft come from all around the world to trade in Singapore. So a boat that might have picked up ballast water in Singapore then comes on its merry way down to New Zealand and parks up in Nelson or in Tauranga or Auckland and may discharge water, Mr. Speaker, and all the risks that go with that. We need a tighter regime to ensure that those risks are not transferred through into the New Zealand biosystems, Mr. Speaker. We have, and this government has said, huge potential in aquaculture. The risks posed by ballast water are huge, and we do need to improve the systems there. Mr. Speaker, the bill also deals with the issue of good neighbour in terms of regional pest management regimes. And at the moment, regional councils are responsible for having pest management regimes, regional pest management plans to be precise, Mr. Speaker, and they deal with all the private land and any pests and weeds that are in that area. They have no ability to provide direction to the Department of Conservation over Crown land, for example. For the most part, in regions like the West Coast or Tasman, where there is a large amount of Crown-owned land under the DOC estate, there has been a good working relationship. This bill will change the law to ensure that there must be coordination between the regional pest management plans and oversight of that Crown land to ensure that we don't have unwanted pests transferring from the Crown land onto private land and effectively undermining all the good work of the regional councils in their planning. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that I must raise is one of cost sharing, and the bill will mandate the shared cost arrangement of control of pests and organisms and incursions in this country. We've seen it most recently with the PSA and the kiwi fruit industry, where the industry will pick up 50% of the cost of control of that, the Crown will pick up the other 50%. Not bad in principle, Mr. Speaker, but I picked up today a report in the Horticultural magazine saying that there are small horticultural niche groups who have no funds to do 50-50 arrangements with the Crown. So what happens if a visitor brings into the country an unwanted pest or organism that might affect asparagus, for example, and the asparagus industry is expected to pick up 50% of the cost? Mr. Speaker, it sounds a fine theory, but there will be many issues that the Labor opposition in the Select Committee will be teasing out, will be testing, will be challenging the government on, because it's important that we don't end up with a dysfunctional and ineffective system to control the pests and diseases if they do come into the country. Mr. Speaker, Labor will be supporting this bill into Select Committee. There are many issues that we will be challenging the government on. This is a vital area for the New Zealand economy, and we don't believe that the government has either the commitment or the funding.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. His time has